The firm of Bowen, McLeod and Britt helps both large corporations and small businesses with insurance, risk management, and employee benefits using the same values they've held true for over 30 years: knowledge, vision, accountability, and service. More information is at bmbinc.com.
Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. A new term entered the local political language this week: astroturfing, a word used to describe political demonstrators being paid for their protesting. If they are actors, the city council chamber may have been their stage. Well, no one was acting and expressing outrage over their sewage and water board bills. The anger was genuine as an investigation showed confused billing practices. Elsewhere, the legislature faced issues of Medicaid funding and regulating pharmaceutical marijuana. A former sheriff is being investigated for his claims of unused annual leave, and the Pelicans left their heart in San Francisco. We'll look at these stories as well as in this the week of a mayoral inauguration that went smoothly. We'll look back at a swearing in 40 years ago that was followed by a flood. On the stage for us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Kevin McGill, reporter, The Associated Press. Katie Moore, investigative reporter, WWL-TV Channel 4. And Michael Stein, reporter, The Lens. We go over to Katie first, and you did a report on an issue that really gets under the skin of a lot of people, and that is the amount of their bills from the New Orleans Sewage and Water Board, their water bills. Some people having outrageously high bills.
Outrageous. We found a woman who was almost charged $32,000 in 1 month for one of her rental units. That's 1,000 square feet that has one person living in it. So that's just one example of crazy bills that we've gotten. Since we started doing our down the drain investigation into the Sewage and Water Board and drainage and the floods and all of that, one of the things that we heard most was, what's up with the billing? So for months now, I've been asking for records, haven't gotten some of the ones that I've asked for, but we have been really digging into this issue and whether or not people are getting charged for water that they're not using, and whether or not the system is fair, because a lot of people in this city think that it's not.
So from what I understand, 1 out of 5 customers is registering a complaint about their billing, and like this customer that had $32,000 for 1 month. For it wasn't where she lived, but it was an apartment, as I understand, right? That she rented out for one individual. I mean, well, they deducted part of that money from her account. She didn't have it all in her account.
They did.
So then, when people have these huge amounts and they protest them, and perhaps they really don't owe that, what happens to that money?
Well, in her situation, she had to go to her bank and she had to protest the charge at the bank. So first, that was step one for her. She called her bank as soon as the bank opened and said, hey, you know, I have this notification that I'm $17,000 overdrawn in my checking account. And I found out that the Sewage and Water Board tried to take it out. So she protested the charge with her bank. Then she had to go to the Sewage and Water Board and get proof that it was a faulty charge, which they admitted it was a faulty charge, obviously. And then took that back to the bank, and the bank restored her funds. Now, her bill is still in flux, and as I said at the end of the story, she ended up getting a bill the day before our story aired for $940-something for that same unit, which obviously is not the usage of one person over a 2-month span.
So what's happening here? Why are people having this problem? I mean, it's meter reading, or is it estimated reading, or they don't have enough people to read the meters? What's going on?
It's all of that. It's all of the above. They don't have enough meter readers. The meter readers that they do have sometimes are cutting corners or trying to read as many meters as they can because they have a shortage of meter readers. And so, you know, they miss one number when they're punching it in because this is a flawed manual, you know, sort of old-fashioned system in how they do this. This is what ends up happening. You end up having these crazy bills that most of the ones that I've reviewed, and we reviewed dozens of bills for that investigative report, most of the ones that I saw were the result of actual meter readings. So that tells you that there's human error there, and human error is playing a significant part in the billing problems that the Sewage and Water Board is having.
So what happens right next door in Jefferson Parish, where it's same people, same topographies, same rain or something.
Right. Well, I mean, all I can tell you, I haven't really dug into what Jefferson Parish does at this point, but I can tell you that I live in Jefferson Parish, and my water bill isn't anywhere close to $600 a month. So, you know, I haven't had any problem with it since I've been living there, I don't know, 3 years now. So.
Yeah, I'm a longtime resident of Jefferson Parish, raised there for the most part, lived in Orleans for a while back in Jefferson, and it's bi-month. It's every other month billing, and well under $100.
Under $100
well
for
under
a house.
100. So back to that question, because we were talking a little bit earlier. If you pay, and then you pay the amount that's, or even a portion of the amount that's sort of an overage, then it's found out that you really don't owe that. They don't give you the money back.
They do not give you the money back. They end up crediting your account. Now, in her case, she was able to get it back because it was this outrageous amount, and she was able to do it through her bank. And if you have the option to do that, I think a lot of people would recommend that that's what you do. Part of her problem was that she was set up for auto pay and auto draft. And so that automatically drafted from her account. It was supposed to be flagged, but something happened in the customer service system to where that didn't happen. They didn't stop the payment. So if you're on that auto pay, you may want to think twice about it.
So the Sewage and Water Board is trying to address this?
They are trying to address it. In her case, again, the bill is under review, and you mentioned the 26,000 investigations since they launched this new billing software. This is 26,000 investigations. This is not 26,000 complaints. This is only the complaints that result in investigations.
Wow.
So we're talking 1 in 5 bills that has an actual open investigation. Still don't know how many actual complaints that they've gotten since that billing system launched in 2016.
Bottom line, take a close look at your water bill if you live in Orleans Parish.
Absolutely.
Okay, Katie, thanks a lot. Going to go over to Michael now. Michael, you're the one who broke a story that really also captivated the public's attention, and that was a protest or a sign of support or opposition to, in this case, it was really for support of Entergy power plant. And you found out that there were actually some actors who were paid to be there to show support.
That's right, yeah. So our investigation came out about a week ago, and we had identified 4 actors that were there, 4 professional actors, one of whom has been in movies with Jack Black and Jim Carrey. Yeah, so we found that people were being paid $60 to attend these meetings in these orange shirts that basically, showed their support for the plant. Other people were paid $200 to deliver pre-written speeches that were put together by these 2 recruiters who seem to be from Texas. And they work for a company called Crowds on Demand, an LA-based company that does exactly what the name suggests they do. On their website, they even point specifically to providing speakers at council meetings. So the big news of the week was that yesterday Entergy came out with an internal investigation. They made that public. That confirmed a lot of what we found. But they also provided more information than we had, which is that the money that went to these paid speakers and this paid support, it originated with Entergy. Now, Entergy said they never, instructed anyone to do this. They never approved anyone to do this. But they basically pointed to one of their subcontractors, the Hawthorne Group, which is a PR agency with a history of this type of astroturfing, which is a term basically when you use money to create the illusion of a grassroots movement. So they're saying, basically, we didn't tell anyone to do this. One of our PR companies did.
So this was, these actors went before Orleans Parish City Council, the previous council, the one that just left
That's
office.
correct.
And the council ultimately did give permission for this power plant to be built in New Orleans East. So what is this present day council saying about this?
So I've talked to Jason Williams a couple times since the news came out. He wants to launch an investigation, and he says there's a consensus among the city council members that they're going to launch this investigation. He wants it to be swift. He said he wants to get it done in a month. He also started, he's exploring new rules that could prevent this from happening in the future. So one idea he's floated is creating a new disclosure. So when you fill out a speaker card at a city council meeting, you have to say your name and you have to say your address. He wants a third disclosure, which is, was I compensated to be here? He's also kind of pointed, maybe to passing a new city council ordinance that would, prevent anyone from doing this.
There's not been any talk about reversing the vote, though, has there?
So, Councilmember Moreno and Palmer have both alluded to that they'd be open to it. I think everyone's waiting for the investigation to conclude before they kind of make that decision. But again, this was a 2-year process, and even without the actor, the paid actors, it was a pretty contentious process. So I think they'll be pretty hesitant to reopen the issue.
And
Remember
also,
talking-
like you said, go ahead, Errol.
I was talking to one council member who was saying, a previous council member, that there's a lot of people that she sees over and over again on different issues. And I don't know if they're paid or anything, but there are people who are just like career protesters and probably some group that people draw from. But also remember when they had the big issue not long after Katrina about closing down the housing projects to build the new developments that we have now. There was a lot of protests. And I remember there was a guy, because the guy started emailing me. They were out of Berkeley, and they came down and they were protesting. And I don't know if they were paid, but somebody paid for them to come down in the protest. And so it just shows that a council chamber is not always the best place to have a good public debate. There's a lot of people actually playing for the TV cameras here more than anything else.
Right, and yeah, so I think, one of the biggest concerns here isn't just on the power plant issue. It's, going forward when we have debates on important issues, there's a concern that this is going to come up, that opposition is going to say, hey, the other side, they're all paid. These are all paid protesters. They aren't even from here. So there's concern that that's going to weigh down debates when you should be actually talking about the issues. There's just going to be a lot of allegations going back and forth.
And we don't want to trample freedom of speech either.
Right,
That's
right.
also a concern as well.
Right. So, in preventing people, who are paid from speaking, there are definitely First Amendment issues. I've talked to, a couple First Amendment lawyers who brought up significant concerns about any, ordinance that prevented anyone from speaking at a public meeting. So yeah, I think there needs to be a balanced approach when you try to prevent this.
And the irony is, even if these people hadn't showed up, the power plant would have probably passed anyway.
That's right. I mean, that's what Williams said. He says there's thousands of pages of testimony, and that's what his decision was based on.
It had been an issue that had been considered for a long time,
Right.
not just that meeting.
Right.
Okay, Michael, good reporting. It's good to have you come here on Informed Sources to your
Thanks.
first visit. All righty, over to Errol. And, we had a new mayor inaugurated. But in 1978, there was sort of an issue that came up right after that.
Yeah, you
mayor
got
was
me thinking, this
inaugurated.
is actually the 40th anniversary of it. I think people missed that point. But in 1978, May 1st, Dutch Morial was inaugurated. And what people remember mostly is that he was the first black mayor. But there was another sub-story to all this. He was inaugurated at Gallia Hall right in front. And of course, you have Duncan Plaza right behind. And that day, there was activity going on to prepare Duncan Plaza for an event 2 days later, which was going to be a celebration of solar power. Calling it Sunday, S-U-N-D-A-Y. This is part of a nationwide celebration. And Duncan Plaza was going to be the centerpiece for celebrating Sunday. So Morial's inaugurated on May 1st, May 3rd. Sun rises and so did the clouds. And it started storming and it rained all day. And it was the heaviest rain. It was the heaviest rain that most New Orleans had seen since Hurricane Betsy in 75, and the city flooded. So here's this man, he's mayor for 2 days, and his city is underwater. It was very, very dramatic, and a lot of damage was done. They had to close the airport. But this was the beginning of the realization that New Orleans had a new problem there, that we didn't have the infrastructure to deal with the modern city. And I remember one point that people had been mentioning was just the Superdome complex, which was fairly new at the time, with a lot of concrete out there that wasn't absorbing water. And so we've had all these new developments, but we just had this ancient plumbing system. And so that was the beginning. And it took years and years to start like the whole drainage along St. Charles Avenue. It would probably still not adequate now, but it's certainly a lot better system than it is. And who knows what Katrina would have been like had it not been for the May 3rd flood in 78, which at least made us aware of it. But the other part is that as Morial is facing this, recovering from the flood, there's another storm in the wind, and that is that the police are threatening a strike. Right. And throughout the rest of the year, that there was talk about, very contentious talk about a strike, and of course that led to the Mardi Gras strike the following year in '79. And so it was a tough beginning. I actually knew somebody who was who happened to be governor. Edwin Edwards was governor at the time, and Edwards and Morial had a no-care relationship, but they could joke with each other. And Morial called, and Edwards was chiding her and saying, "Dutch, since you've been mayor, we've had a flood and we got a police strike, So But it was a very critical time, and so far Latoya Cantrell, as far as we know, has gotten off easier.
Yeah,
Despite the barge. Despite the barge hitting her inaugural ball, right?
That's true.
Well, that's true, but not a major flood, and we hope that she doesn't have to contend with that too. That's for sure. Thanks a lot, Errol. Over to Kevin now, and legislature still meeting in regular session, and the budget is
Still a mess.
Still a bone of contention.
Still,
Yes, indeed.
it's still a bit of a mess. The backdrop, as we've discussed before, this is an even-numbered year, so the legislature can't raise revenue in a regular session in an even-numbered year. They know that there's hundreds of millions of dollars going off the books, the temporary taxes, on July 1st. They were unable to agree in a special session on how or whether to replace them. The House, a few weeks ago, passed a budget that made huge cuts to health care. The private providers, the private entities who now run the charity hospitals were saying, we can't operate with this, we'll have to shut down. Just this week, letters were going out to Medicaid recipients who are in nursing homes or getting other kinds of aid, and they were being told that they're going to lose that aid, and they were essentially, they had the effect of being early eviction notices for people in nursing homes. As we were preparing for the show tonight, the Senate Finance Committee passed its version of the budget. It restored a lot of the health care money. There's no longer, it appears, that threat, if this budget passes, that the charity hospitals will close. Restored money for Medicaid. However, the chairman himself said this would, his words were, probably effectively close most of state government. It's going to make huge cuts to higher education now. TOPS, the tuition opportunity program for students, would be funded at about 70%. Talk of eliminating food stamps. No one expects this budget to ultimately be what goes into effect on July 1st, but there's also a little subplot here. There's contention. Should they even pass a budget? There are senators who say, yes, we have to pass something. We're constitutionally required to. The administration, the governor's administration, is they haven't said it outright, but there seems to be a threat of a veto of anything that comes out like this. There is some agreement that, there appears to be agreement anyway, that this session is going to end early. They're shooting for May 18th. There will be a special session again, and maybe this time they'll be able to agree on some kind of a replacement for some of the taxes that are going off the books, and fully fund TOPS and health care.
Okay, so we saw the governor this week with a press conference along with Rebecca Gee, our Department of Health secretary, talking about we're sending out these eviction notices basically to nursing home people, folks in the nursing home who are on Medicaid, to home health people. Also, right after that, we see GOP, Cameron Henry, saying this is a scare tactic, you know?
Yeah, obviously it scared people. Now,
it does scare people. Just listening to what you're saying is scary.
The question of whether it was a tactic or not is what's really up for debate. The House members who are complaining that it was a scare tactic are the same House members who passed that budget. But even there seems to be this weird consensus at the Capitol that none of this is really going to happen. They're going to come up with something, and yet how they're going to do it is still up in the air. And as I said, the Senate Finance Committee passed this budget today, a fairly contentious meeting from what I understand from our correspondent in Baton Rouge. Whether the full Senate will pass it is up in the air. Right. Whether the House will agree to the Senate version is up in the air, and whether the governor will sign it or veto it is still a mystery. And will they really be able to close this session down by May 18th and agree on new revenue in a session that would presumably start around May 21st or 22nd.
Touching quickly on medical marijuana, now we know that it is happening here in the state, and the pharmacies that are going to be dispensing it have been identified. What else is going on?
Well, we're expecting medical marijuana to be available this summer. Now, there were bills, what's interesting about it, there were bills to decriminalize marijuana in the legislature this year, so little support that they never saw the light of day, no vote. And yet, a few blocks from here at the Morial Convention Center, there was a huge marijuana business expo. People in business attire coming around, holding meetings, talking about investment opportunities, talking about growing the business. a big expo that looked like basically a home improvement show that you might see at the convention center. Hydroponic growing systems, cultivation experts, greenhouses, booths for law firms, venture capitalists, all kinds of every business entity you could think of, looking to see the growth in the marijuana industry, not just medical marijuana, but also in areas where it's being legalized for recreational use. The big buzz at one meeting was, hey, the governor's veto in Maine of a bill that sets it in motion after voters approved legal has been overridden. Thank goodness, is what it was there. And this is after John Boehner is easing and actually going to promote, at least I think, medical marijuana. Chuck Schumer has said he'll push legislation to get the federal government off the backs of states where it's legal. And so the question is, with all this money going around, will states like Louisiana always be against marijuana?
Because it's definitely getting to be big business, as well as the big buzz, as you said. I know, no pun intended there. Okay. Back over now to Errol. And no, actually, we're going to go to Katie right now. Former St. Tammany Parish Sheriff Jack Strain, now some questions about some money that he took with him for annual leave pay when he left.
Yes, so we've been investigating Jack Strain long time, since 2013. His work release programs were something that I worked with the advocate on. We exposed problems with those, deaths, drug use, lack of supervision, et cetera. So that started in 2013. The feds really picked up their case looking into other parts of Strain's, sort of empire as sheriff a couple of years ago, and then we heard about a grand jury subpoena back in March where they requested information about those work release programs, and then they also requested his sick or annual leave payout in that subpoena. And so we obtained some records that showed that he got $24,000 in annual leave. And the question was, did he qualify for that as an elected official? And two, did he get more than he should have?
So do records show that Sheriff Strain took vacation while he was, he was sheriff for a long time there. Did he take time off?
So there are records that indicate that he did take some time off. I think the question that is going to have to be answered again is, did he qualify for sick and vacation time, period? Most elected officials, many elected officials, I shouldn't say most because I'm not sure what the number is, but many of them don't because they're considered, essentially on the clock all the time. They're unclassified employees for the state, and so normally they don't get it. And so the question will be, is he eligible to get it? Peter Galvin was not, who was the coroner in St. Tammany, obviously went to jail, among other things, for getting sick and annual leave payouts that he wasn't entitled to, according to the feds. So that's going to be a big question as part of this bigger investigation into the work release programs and to his time as sheriff.
So what is the Sheriff's Department saying now under the current administration? What's the policy, what's the protocol, and as it relates to former Sheriff Strain?
Well, the policy right now, Randy Smith, the current sheriff, decided not to take sick and annual leave about 6 months into his term. He apparently got some advice from the Sheriff's Association, according to records and emails that we obtained, that said, you really shouldn't take this. You shouldn't be accumulating this for all of those reasons that we talked about a minute ago. The fact that you're considered on the clock all the time, and it's very hard to not only log your work time, but your off time. So while Strain did log some off time, there are some other questions about the policy in that he was only supposed to get 208 hours max, and he got 360. So that's another big question.
So the feds are looking into this,
Yes.
not the local authorities.
No, the U.S. Attorney's Office, federal grand jury.
And any comment from former Sheriff Strain?
No.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, Katie. I'm going to go over to Errol now. Now we go over to Errol, and we're going to just tie up this discussion talking about our Pelicans. And yes, well, they're not in the playoff run anymore, but boy, what a show they gave us.
They cause excitement. I think a real sign of making progress with the fans was at the Jazz Fest. I saw a lot of people wearing Pelicans T-shirts. And Fest, you never saw anybody with a Pelicans T-shirt. It was always Saints or even Boston Red Sox more than you see the Pelicans. So I think that maybe they're starting to catch hold a little bit. I think the fans are becoming a little bit more familiar with the players. You talk about the different people in the Pelicans, but one person who I think really needs to be acknowledged is Gail Benson.
Sure.
Because she really did some critical things. There was a story actually in the Picayune this morning that on the day after Tom Benson died, she went and addressed the team and told the team, I'm going to be there for you guys. And that made a big thing. And it quoted Alvin Gentry, the coach, is talking about how much it's really meant that she was, and she's traveled with the team. She's eating lunch with the team. I don't think she's taking foul shots with the team, but she's been there and she's shown a lot of support. And it's critical because a lot of players are making decisions about their future. You know, they want to come back to this team and future draft choices. And so, in the past, if you looked at New Orleans, you didn't see a very stable picture here. And so I think she's done a lot to show stability, and the fact that we have a team that looks like it could be a winner if they bring their players back, if they bring Boogie Cousins back and all that, it's going to make a big difference. But I got to tell you, hold on, New Orleans, because we may be heading to kind of an exciting period here. The Saints are looking good for next year. I mean, everybody's excited about the Saints. I mean, they were like one bad play away from possibly getting into the Super Bowl this past season. And had DeMarcus Cousins not gotten hurt, who knows, they could have made it into the finals. The one thing that maybe is going to hold the Pelicans back for the next couple of years is that San Francisco is just so good. The two divisions, the Western and the Eastern Division of the NBA, the Western has the two best teams in Houston and in San Francisco. But it was very impressive this year.
So really, I hear people say, okay, the end of this Pelican season, going back to the Pelicans, is really the beginning of a really great season for the future. That definitely we see a lot of growth and strength in the team that we maybe didn't see at the beginning of this season.
Yeah. It's almost literally the beginning in reality too, because the NBA season is so long. Okay, it starts in October, and so we're only a few months away from the beginning, and who knows when the preseason starts. So, but I think fans will be excited to see the team again.
And those T-shirts are really neat too.
They
look
are.
really great. Okay.
It was Gail Benson who picked the red color
Right.
and the image of the Pelicans.
And her great sense of style and design.
So she gets a lot of credit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, back to you for looking ahead now.
Well, at the Audubon Zoo, progress is underway for the new Lion Safari Village. They're going to have a pride of lions. And how many lions are in a pride? At least 3 males and a miscellaneous number of females. But it's due to be ready for next year, and due to a donation by Boise and Joy Bollinger. So that.
Wonderful, great addition to the zoo. Kevin.
Yeah, and back at the legislature, that bill that would have extended the Harrah's casino lease breezed through the House early in the session. Then the news came out that Harrah's parent company might be up for sale, and that's kind of stalled everything, and it's been stalled for quite some time. But perhaps the Senate Judiciary B Committee will be taking up the bill that deals with that lease on Monday.
Okay. Katie.
I did a story last week on a rape of a 16-year-old girl, alleged rape, and we're going to be watching this week to see whether or not the district attorney decides to charge the person in that case. So that's one to watch as well, and that's a St. Tammany case as well.
Okay. Michael.
I'll be looking to see what the new administration is going to do with the public surveillance program started under Landrieu. There's a ton of questions we haven't had answered, and a lot of questions that were tabled until this administration. So I'll be looking.
You're talking about those red and blue light cameras that we see everywhere?
That's right.
Okay. All right, Michael. Thanks a lot. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you all for joining us. And of course, we want to see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
The firm of Bowen, McLeod, and Britt helps both large corporations and small businesses with insurance, risk management, and employee benefits using the same values they've held true for over 30 years: knowledge, vision, accountability, and service. More information is at bmbinc.com.